Good evening, everyone. This is ThatCrypto and
Dennis.
and Avat.
So, we had no topic today. Something we say time preference.
Yes, that's one of my
Loved ones.
favorite topics. It's kind of close to philosophy, and I wanted to talk about this for a long time. But first, just a little bit of news. What's happening lately in the last couple of weeks? We see that companies, specifically public traded companies, buying Bitcoin. They convert their treasuries if they have cash on hand. They convert it into Bitcoin and keep it on their balance sheets.
Probably not in 100%, but that's something new. Had that happen a year ago? I guess no. It just started.
No, we haven't heard about it happening a year ago. Like, there were funds that were investing in Bitcoin, maybe even publicly traded funds, and I think we had a mining company, which is Hut 8 mining company, which is in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
They obviously have Bitcoin on their balance sheets because they mine Bitcoin. And some funds, they were last year, but now we see companies that are not related to cryptocurrency at all, and it started with MicroStrategy, which is Nasdaq traded company, and they bought $425 million worth of Bitcoin, and now their CEO Michael Saylor is kind of everywhere on every podcast and every YouTube channel, giving interview, contemplating about it. And this is an interesting story. So he's a long-time CEO, like over 30 years.
It's an experience.
As far as I understand, the company provides, his company MicroStrategy provides IT services. So he has an understanding of what's happening, and it's interesting to listen to him of his vision of actually what's happening and what kind of transformations are happening right now, and how the pandemic accelerated the transformation.
So just to make it clear, we are not talking about some cyberpunk, but we are talking about professional CEO, which is like business person.
Yeah, this is not the cypherpunks at all. So they're not like fringe individuals. This is the traditional Wall Street type CEO with his company. It has $1.5 billion market cap, and he bought for 425 million, like almost 30%, converted into Bitcoin. And this website is pretty new. It's called bitcointreasuries.org, created by NVK, who is the founder of the Cold Card wallet and CoinKite, Canadian company from Toronto. So the website tracks the publicly traded companies that decided to purchase Bitcoin and place it on the balance sheet. And so at first was MicroStrategy. After they were, and actually Michael Saylor practically didn't know anything about Bitcoin,
Until
as he
now.
said, until April, after the pandemic started. He started to contemplate of what's going on in the world. What does it mean to have cash on your balance sheet?
And how to save it.
What are the costs when the money supply increases at ridiculous rates? So then he looked deeper into that. It took him several months, then a couple more months to talk with the investors. So do all the reporting and the paperwork, and eventually, they bought 38,000 Bitcoins. And when that happened, on Twitter everyone was excited, and they were asking Jack, from the founder of Twitter and the Square, like, what's going on. And if you check Jack's Twitter account, okay, let me try to pull this up. Twitter.com/Jack. Nice. So his profile, the only word in the description is Bitcoin. So not Twitter, not Square, nothing else but Bitcoin. So and then people were asking, "What's up with you?"
Mm-hmm.
And his second company, which is Square, they have the Cash App and they sell Bitcoin. So and last week they bought $50 million worth of Bitcoin, and they keep it in their own cold storage. So as for
Cool.
yeah, because that's their business.
Yeah.
MicroStrategy keeps it in custody. I think Gemini or something, but they have a custodian. And the list is growing. New companies are added almost every day, and these are only the publicly traded companies. We also have like private companies in Canada. The restaurant chain bought Bitcoin, and another smaller company, IT company in Ottawa, they also.
Yeah, they did the same. However, when we are talking about public company, that means it's not just a CEO who decide or CEO who talk with CFO and they decide. Actually, they need to convince investors, the people with different mindset and everything.
And also you have to consider that the Bitcoin is a very niche product, even though we talk about Bitcoin all the time, but actually a lot of people don't know what it is.
Absolutely true.
Well, yeah, it's the people have heard of Bitcoin. They know like the word, but what it is, what is the value, what's the technology.
What is the about in general? Even.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like if you are a CEO of a publicly traded companies, you have lots of risks if you're trying to buy some sort of the internet magic money assets, especially in the amount of $500 million. And the question is, do you want to take this risk, or you like prefer to
keep traditional?
Yeah, like to keep your salary and run your company in a traditional way. And right now we see that the economic situation is so dire that companies are looking at alternative assets to invest in. And well, yesterday or 2 days ago, the Fidelity published a report on actually investing in alternative assets on Bitcoin, basically. So they observed the trend that more and more companies in the last 20 years allocate more funds. They allocate more funds to alternative assets.
Yeah.
Alternative means it's traditional stock markets, bonds, and I forgot. And there's another one. So alternatives can be commodities, can be real estate, gold.
And recently Bitcoin as well.
And Bitcoin right now is one of those assets. And interestingly enough, Fidelity recommends to allocate 5% of your portfolio to Bitcoin. On the other hand, it's their business. They have the institutional grade custody solution, so they make money out of it. But
probably they thought
I
about.
agree with maybe 5% is even too little.
We are talking about big traditional companies, so for them, speaking about 5%, it's so extreme. If they don't have solid background on those, they will never even name Bitcoin in their report at all.
Yeah, and another trend that I wanted to kind of mention, we see the governments all over the world trying to crack down on Bitcoin and try to control it, and with all this anti-money laundering rules, know your client, they're forcing all companies that are dealing with Bitcoin to KYC all their customers and to know where they send their Bitcoin, so that they can track everything.
just as disclaimer, anti-money laundering is a cool thing that has to be done, and KYC is something that companies in a certain way must do. We are talking about how the good ideas may be used in a not so cool way. So yeah.
Yeah, this is another question. What they're dealing with, trying to prevent terrorism by
Yes.
mass surveillance, and different studies show that it didn't really work. They didn't prevent anything by surveilling and recording everyone
True.
more or less on the planet. The same goes with the Bitcoin. The main narrative that the criminals use Bitcoin for payments.
Oh.
By the way, they also use the US dollar in.
I guess even more.
What was it, like a couple of weeks ago? There was a report about the international banks that they have to launder $2 trillion.
And for like something common.
Yeah, and the bankers don't go to jail. They pay some fine, a little bit, and they continue their shady activities. A couple of days ago, also a few countries, like the Five Eyes, Canada, UK, US, Australia, New Zealand, plus Japan and India, they signed a statement urging companies to build the backdoors for their end-to-end encryption products, like messaging systems and so on, so that, well, the justification behind it is that there's terrorism and child abuse and child pornography, so the law enforcement agencies should have access to all the content that's protected by end-to-end encryption, so that's some sort of backdoors, and the companies should think and collaborate with the government and change the architecture of their products so that they can allow.
Did they think about what if that backdoor get leaked?
I don't know if they thought about it, but they didn't mention this in the statement.
Yeah.
And then, like, who's gonna decide what they can and cannot read?
Absolutely.
The law enforcement, let's say, maybe they need a warrant to read something, but the company itself, if they have
the open backdoor, they can read.
Yeah, if they have an
everything.
option to read everything what they want, like what stops them from reading everything? And so, what was it? Almost 2 weeks ago, news about BitMEX, which was one of the oldest and the biggest derivatives exchange in Bitcoin, which I think they're registered in Seychelles or something like that. So it's not in the United States, but because they have clients from the United States,
that's why
CFTC started the investigation because of the securities law violation, and also the Department of Justice, which is already a criminal offense. So they are accusing BitMEX in money laundering and like violation the Bank Secrecy Act. So they arrested one of the three founders. And so what we see here is how Bitcoin reacted to such news. So it dropped from almost 11,000 to 10.5 thousand. So a drop of about $400 on the news of such magnitude.
So they get CTO under certain arrest. The US government made so much effort, and the price changed for $400. When we are talking about the current price of Bitcoin is 10,000.
Yeah, price change on like, what is this, 4%?
4%, yeah.
And to understand what's the magnitude of this event is, we have to see here that the BitMEX had 220,000 bitcoins in their cold wallets, so that's 1.5% of the current supply
of Bitcoin in general.
Yeah, so that's a lot of Bitcoin. That could affect the market, well, in the past for sure. But right now, the Bitcoin is so mature that it almost there was no reaction. We see the 4% moves without any news at all. And I liked this one. This is an interesting part. It's about the privacy and blockchain forensics. So the guys knew that their wallet kept. So it was a multi-sig wallet. So 2 out of 3, the BitMEX said on their website. However, they figured out it's not 2 out of 3. It's 3 out of 4. With one key, it's called a vanity key, that's always signing the transaction. So, but well, technically, it's only 2 out of 3. They need 2 extra signatures to sign. And from the blockchain, from all the open information, they could figure out which keys were used to sign the transactions, and actually they correlate, or basically guess which of the founders owns which key. Because one of the founders was arrested for a few hours, and he wasn't signing. So that's about the privacy on the blockchain that you should always think about. That
so we just
a lot of things can be extracted from the open data. What is the time preference, first of all?
Yep.
I've learned this from the Seyfarina Moon's book, the Bitcoin Standard. Basically, every time you kind of make a deal with yourself, whether you want to consume right now or postpone it and consume in the future, and the same thing with money. So at every moment you decide if you want to consume at this particular moment and get instant gratification, or save your money and consume in the future. So the future always has a discount, because it may never arrive for you. We are mortal, we die, so we always have to consider the thing. And the discount depends on the certainty of the situation. Obviously subjective certainty, what you believe in. So the higher the uncertainty, the higher the time preference for the present moment, because you don't really know what's going to happen in the future. So the high time preference means that you prefer the present time much more than the future. Low time preference means that the present time has a higher preference always, but not as much as with a high time preference. So if you have a low time preference, you think about the future, you think long term, you save more, and you think about the bigger goals. So if you have low time preference, you might participate in education. Like, you can educate yourself, you can go to the university, or even take a larger course like 10 years medical school or something like that. The low time preference is something that immediate gratification. You take a 1-month course on the Solidity programming language, and you think that you're gonna get the $200,000 a year. That's what was there. The same thing with food. So fast food, you know that it's bad in the long term. It's it's bad for your health. But right now it feels tasty. You get the instant gratification. If you have low time preference, you think long term. You do sports. You eat healthy. You do everything that
you are planning your life in a good way.
So it's less joy and gratification in the present moment, but more joy in the future. And on the societal level, when you change the time preference of entire society, it changes the structure of how we behave. Like for example, the climate change,
Mhm.
the problem that we have right now. And there's lots of discussion of how do you approach the solution, like what the, do we install more solar panels, wind turbines, and all this kind of stuff, but it doesn't seem to work. The only incentive would be to, like, if you can change the time preference from a high to low, that would mean that people would think about the future, people would think about their children and their grandchildren, and every time you make a decision of what you want to do at the present moment, you would think about long-term consequences. In my view, this is the only way of how to approach the problem, because you can't really force people to do things that they don't want to do, and they only think when they want to do when they think about the future.
They want to do it, yeah.
In a proper way. So, and now how it's connected to money at all. Before the 20th century, we were in the 19th century, we were on a gold standard. And the gold standard means that your savings, if you have gold, it's the inflation was pretty low. So the new supply of gold was about 2% a year, which means like whatever you have right now, it's gonna stay the same considering the economy is growing. So
your gold gonna be
so if you have the hard money like gold, you don't need to think where to invest your money just to store the value of your money, just not to lose it. So you are incentivized to save. At least you're not gonna lose the value of your money, so you can save for 20 years, then pay for a house or send children to
you have
school,
that option, yeah.
Start a business, invest in long-term projects. And this is what was happening in the late 19th century. People were investing in long-term projects. They a lot of actually breakthrough inventions were made at that time, just like electricity, automobile, planes.
Obviously, it didn't return in a day. That's for sure.
Yes, and after that, like all the 20th century, we were just making incremental improvements on those breakthrough innovations, because the huge innovations, they take a lot of time, a lot of investment to come to a good result, and it's not happening anymore because by design the fiat money is designed to have inflation. So we hear this
all the time, yeah.
2% inflation must be there without any explanation. Actually, I'm trying to hear it from the central banks or like whoever is rooting for inflation. But anyways, this is the design. The money will be inflated artificially
and all
the time. And you know, if you save your money, if you keep your money in a bank, your money will be disappearing. So it will lose the purchasing power. So what do? Well, you have two options. You need to invest it into something that will generate profit for you, which comes with risks. So you might have profits, or you might lose everything, depending on where you're investing. And to mitigate those risks, you need to spend a lot of time researching where to invest, and that's the second job. Basically, you work on the first job, you get paid. Now you can't just save it in a bank. You need to spend more time. You manage, or you hire someone and you pay your consultant. Or the second one, you can just spend everything right now. Because you know, if you spend right now, you can buy more stuff than a year from now. So why do people want to actually save at all? Because the money is, well, you don't know how the world's gonna change. It's kind of an insurance policy. So anything can happen. House can burn down, and now you have some savings to rent an apartment or buy new furniture.
Safety net.
This is the safety net, like, yeah, or maybe an illness of some sort that you can't work for some time, and then you need to invest in your health. So this is why you keep money. It's the most liquid good that can be exchanged to anything you want. But with fiat money, you don't really, well, because actually saving comes with cost. You have to pay in the amount of inflation, which we are told is 2% a year roughly.
Not really them.
However, the money supply is increasing at a rate of roughly 7% a year in the last 70 years or so. So if you look at the money supply, that's inflation is 7%. So you pay 7% on all your saving just to.
Not to say that we know that inflation can go way much more than 7. So we are talking about pretty stable conditions.
Well, the inflation itself is a not clear term. So inflation actually is how do you increase the money supply? That's the standard definition. What we understand by inflation is what they call the CPI, Consumer Price Index. However, the CPI is an arbitrary number. They change the methodology every year because the goods that we have, they change every year. The new technologies they have, or the preferences of the people, the new products appear, and actually there's no one-to-one comparison. It's always changing. So when it's possible to modify your methodology in a way that you always come to the numbers that you're looking for. And actually with technology, the prices fall because the new technology lower your cost of production. So if you install robots, then you don't need to pay wages. So like with every year, the prices should fall organically. But what's happening with the central banks, they believe that the inflation is good for the economy. And actually it started from the time when the governments needed money to fund the wars, World War I, World War II. And then they thought, well, that's a good thing that we can create as much money as we need at any moment. Let's just keep the system this way. Let's justify it by some Keynesian economic theories that inflation is good and deflation is just, it's a terrible idea, it's just hell. No one wants to say the word deflation. But no one actually, I think they stopped explaining at all. So they just take it as
a given.
Yeah, as a given, as a final truth, and they create inflation. So with this environment, you are incentivized to spend at the present moment. So you have high time preference. But then we moved further in the 70s when people got access to credit, credit cards. And all of a sudden, now you're actually incentivized to borrow from the future because of the inflation, you'll have to pay less in real terms than you're borrowing. And that's actually, it's almost, the time preference goes way beyond. So you not only prefer present moment, but you are decreasing the value of the future because you're borrowing from there. And now we see this, the debt is growing tremendously, which means that people consume in the present moment, which also means you don't need to, you're forced to consume by the inflation problem, which also means you buy stuff that you don't really need. So it's overconsumption of stuff that we don't need, and now we are talking about actually the same thing: overconsumption, pollution, and because people buy stuff that they don't need and they just throw it away. And also this stuff needs to be produced by someone, which also adds to pollution and the climate change.
So we have a cycle. We borrow, we spend, because we borrow and we spend again and again.
Yeah,
and we love the current moment.
And the interesting thing that I don't really understand is I don't understand how it's gonna resolve, because we will have to pay those debts in the future, or like resolve the situation somehow, and no one seems to think about it. So the high time preference leads to bad health, bad food consumptions, because it's kind of tasty. You get companies figure out how to trick our bodies into feeling good. The sugar came first in the 70s, and they were advertising and promoting it, basically killing people. The same thing goes with IT companies right now. All the social media, maybe not related to the high or low time preference, but I mean the companies can figure out how to hack biology. And actually,
they try.
It's actually correlated with the high time preference, because we want to get this hit of dopamine right away, so we stay on social media scrolling down and up,
keeping that satisfaction,
for likes, which actually doesn't make sense in the long term.
Yeah.
If you think about like 20 years from now, do you really care how many likes you get on this page? No, it's short term thinking and high time preference. So now what happens with Bitcoin?
You can keep your money.
Yeah, there's no inflation in Bitcoin. The issuance, we know the schedule, and it's limited by 21 million. So you know that if you have Bitcoin, you will own the same percentage of the entire money supply, no matter what.
Yeah.
So you don't need to think where to invest and how to preserve your savings, which is good, because you kind of removed your second job of researching this or hiring an advisor.
Less risks.
So yeah, those transaction costs are removed from the economy, so you can be more productive in your original work. Plus, because the money doesn't erode and with time, the purchasing power is not decreasing. Now you can keep saving. You know that nothing, that the value is preserved there, and most likely it's gonna grow, because the more and more people join the Bitcoin community, the more people use money, while the supply is still the same. So you think about the future.
Mm-hmm. You have more part of it.
Yes, and if you need to spend it, you actually will be thinking, do you really need these things, or is it just garbage? So that's how we reduce the unnecessary consumption.
Wiser decision made.
Yes, this exactly. But also, you just don't buy junk that you don't need. That's the major problem. Sure. You start thinking about your health, because when you think long term, you know your money is going to be there 30, 40, 50 years from now.
You want to have the health.
You want to have the health to actually enjoy your money in the future. While you're thinking long term, you also may think about your children and grandchildren, because you can pass your money on to your grandchildren, and the money will still have value. And because you're thinking that far away, you might also think about the climate change implications of
the global
of your activity. Even if you start a business, maybe it's not as important for you to make as much profit in the fiat terms, because it's going to inflate in the end. But it's more important that
keep the environment safe.
The climate is still there 50 years from now, when you retire, or when your grandchildren
can enjoy
will be running your company. So philosophically speaking, Bitcoin may change. I think it will change the entire. It's like the social structure of how people
planning their future. It's kind of enable low time preference.
Yeah, it's how people behave, how people make decisions. based on which values, and actually it changes the values. So your time preference depends on your internal values. What's more important for you? And Bitcoin changes this in organically. You don't need to explain this to anyone. You don't need to force it on anyone.
And as a side effect, if there are more people around you who made reasonable, good, long-term decision, you also would like to behave the same. You kind of feel uncomfortable when you do something stupid one just to get some enjoyment right now, when all around you are thinking big.
Yeah, this is the societal values. So we have all common values, and we kind of share it. It's exactly the same way. No one teaches you at school what's good or bad. It's just how people, if they frown upon you, whatever you do is wrong, or like they smile, and like this is what people value. So if eventually it can change the value of society, what we value. And how we behave according to our values. Actually, Bitcoin is a very interesting beast in itself. It touches a lot of
features of our life,
society and life. And yesterday, when I was watching the interview of Michael Saylor from MicroStrategy, and he said that Bitcoin has this community of people that kind of work on educate everyone else, and they do it for free. And then I thought, why would they do it? And actually, they're not doing this for free, because they have the self-interest, because they have Bitcoin, and the more people use Bitcoin, the higher the price of Bitcoin, and they profit directly.
And that's a long-term planning, I would say. That's exactly long-term planning.
Yes, this is long-term planning. Short-term would be just trading, pumping it up. We see also Telegram groups and pump and dump thing. But actually, the intensive for educating people and bringing more into Bitcoin, it's actually inside the Bitcoin itself. So the incentives are there. Incentives for miners, incentives for users, incentives for everyone, and it's a beautiful invention with a beautiful story. Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yeah. Let's all get a short, probably summary about time preference and Bitcoin. We can say that, as we all talk, Bitcoin enables people to make long-term decisions and make the world, again, bold statement, but it is, make the world a better place.
Yeah, so Bitcoin can change the values of the society on a large scale, on how people behave. So maybe it's going to prevent wars. Not only because the Bitcoin cannot be printed and the governments can just print Bitcoin and fund the war campaigns, but also because the war is the short-term solution. It's a high time preference. Yeah, we win right now, we get something in return. But the long-term will be cooperation. The trade will be the long-term solution. When you elevate everyone with war, you just destroy all the assets, the houses, the industries. But with cooperation, you grow the pie, you grow the life standards of everyone. So this property of Bitcoin is not really discussed a lot, but I think it's
one of the valuable things about that.
It's really valuable thing to look at. So the Bitcoin can solve a lot of problems in our society that are related to short-term thinking and high time preference. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Dennis. Thanks everybody for watching us, and
thanks guys.
Yeah.
Low time preference.
Sure.
And see you next week.
See ya.